All right, well, it is 1 o'clock on the dot, so let's go ahead and get started with our webinar for this afternoon, Introduction to Excel. As you can see on the screen, I just have an agenda. We're first going to do a tour of Microsoft Excel. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about teaching Excel, some tips and tricks. We're going to put together a simple workbook and look at inserting a chart. So let me go ahead and bring Excel up. There we go. So when you access an Excel workbook, this is what you're originally going to see. At the very top, you have all of your ribbons, and it defaults to the home ribbon. So on the home ribbon, you've got several different groupings. You've got clipboard, font, alignment, group, and so on. And then you have an insert ribbon. And to move from ribbon to ribbon, I'm just simply clicking on the word. So you've got insert, page layout, formulas, data, review, view, and help that default when you open up your Excel workbook. Now, additional ribbons will appear, and we'll talk about those as we go through the webinar this afternoon. Below your ribbons, you have something called a name box. I'll go ahead and enlarge this a little bit. Make it a little bit easier for you to see. So you have your name box. So currently, I am in cell A1, and I know that because it's got a green box around it. If I move around, you can see that the name box is changing from D2 to D3 to C3 and so on. And I can move around in Excel in a couple of different ways. I can use my mouse and I can click. I can use the arrows on my keyboard. It just kind of depends on what is easiest for you. And next to the name box, you have what's called your formula bar. And that is a way that you can enter data into your Excel worksheet. So below that, you have all of your columns, and the columns are represented by the letters of the alphabet. So you see A, B, C, D, and so on. Down the side, you have all of your rows. When I say the name of a box, it's always going to be the column first and the row second. And if I just arrow over, you'll see that Excel goes on and on and on. I can go into double, triple, quadruple columns, as well as thousands of rows. Obviously, we won't be getting to all of that today, but you certainly can do that. So when you're talking about each cell, when you look at each cell, you can put one of three things in each one of these cells. And it breaks down to that you can put in a label, a value, or a formula. A lot of people tell me that they're somewhat hesitant to use Excel. They might be a little bit scared of Excel. So I like to break it down into bite-sized pieces so that it's easy for folks to understand. Okay, so then we go down to the bottom and it defaults to sheet 1. When you open a new Excel workbook, depending on what version you're running of Excel, it may have one worksheet and it may have 3 worksheets. Some of the older versions default to 3 worksheets. That does not matter. We can add and delete sheets as we go along. And you can have 1 sheet in your workbook, or you can have 15 sheets in your workbook. A question that's asked of me quite frequently is, when I save, do I have to save each worksheet, or do I just save the workbook? And the answer is, when you save, it's going to save all of your sheets, whether you have 1 or 22, into the one workbook. So you can think of it kind of as a textbook. A textbook has multiple chapters. Some textbooks have 9 chapters, 16 chapters, 22 chapters, whatever the case may be. But it's all inside of that one book. So you don't need to worry about saving it more than once. Okay, so and then down, going to that's the lower left, going to the lower right, You have another option to move around in your spreadsheet. So if you want to move, you've got a sliding bar down at the bottom. You also have some different views. So we're going to work in the normal view today. You also have a page layout view. Sometimes this can be helpful when you're going to print an Excel worksheet. And then you have your page break preview, which is also handy when you go to print something. But like I say, 99.9% of the time, I am in the normal view. And next to that is you've got the ability to zoom out and to zoom in, which is where I went to in order to enlarge my Excel worksheet to make it a little bit easier for you to see. Okay, so when I'm going to go up to A1. So when I go up to A1, if I want to enter data or a label into A1, there's a couple of different ways that I can approach this. I have A1 selected, so I can just start typing it. Maybe I'll just type in Monday. Yeah, so that's one way that you can enter data into a cell, excuse me. Another way that you can enter it, if you double click, it's going to put you into the edit mode. So I could enter data into A2 at that point. If I want to enter something into an Excel, a cell, I can also go up to the formula bar and I can type in the information that I want in there. So ultimately, there's three different ways that you can enter data into a cell. The next thing that I want to talk about is the mouse face, because this is very important. When you're working in Excel, you have to be cognizant of your mouse face and what it looks like, because in order to determine what you're going to do, you need to know what mouse face you have. So right now, I just have a solid white cross. And let's say that I want to highlight cells A1 and B1, which have my labels Monday and Tuesday in them. I can hover my mouse over A1, click and drag, and I can select both A1 and B1. At this point, we're going to go in and we're going to talk about some tricks that you can teach Excel. So let's say that I want to fill in the days of the week in C1, D1, and so on. Typically, you would think that I would have to go in there and type in Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. That's not true. I have a pattern established here. So what I'm going to do is in the lower right-hand corner, I'm going to hover my mouse over what they call the fill handle. And that fill handle, when I hover my mouse over it, it gives me a little black cross. And when I click and hold down on my mouse, it fills in. I mean, I can go on through as many columns as I want to, but it will fill in the days of the week for me. So right now I have through Friday, and maybe we want to go all the way to Sunday. So that's one little trick that you can use in Excel. Now, actually, I had typed in Monday and Tuesday, and technically you don't need to do that. So I'm going to come down to A3, and I'm going to type in Sunday, and I'm going to place that. And by placing that, I mean right now I'm still in the edit mode, and I still have my cursor flashing. So in order to take it out of the edit mode, you can select another cell, you can hit the Enter key, you can hit the try this again. Let's type in Sunday. Okay, so we've got Sunday in there, and I'm just going to place that, like I was saying, by either hitting the Enter key or selecting another cell. So when I have Sunday selected or A3 selected, I have the ability to take my fill handle and pull out. So in the newer versions of Excel, you only need to type in one day of the week. In older versions, you may have to show it the pattern of Monday, Tuesday. So if I abbreviate Sunday, then when I go to use my fill handle, it's going to abbreviate the days of the week for me. Okay, same thing with the months. If I want to use the months of the year, Excel knows the months of the year. I can type in January, use that fill handle, pull that out, and it will fill in the months of the year for me. If I abbreviate January, then Excel is going to abbreviate my fill. Okay, so those are some labels and some little tricks that you can utilize in Excel. Excel is very intuitive. So the more tips that you know, the more tricks that you know, the easier it's going to be for you to utilize Excel. So let's say that in A11, I type in a 5, and then in A12, excuse me, I type in a 10. So I have a pattern going here. I'm counting by 5s. And let's say that for whatever reason, I want to count by 5s all the way to 100. You may say, you know, I have to type in 15 and 20 and 25 and 30. Absolutely not the truth, as you probably have already guessed from my demonstration with the days of the week and the months of the year. When I select, and again, I'm going to select or highlight A11 and A12 because I need to show Excel my pattern. Now, one thing that I do want to mention is that whenever you select multiple cells, the first cell that you select appears that it's not highlighted or selected because it's not grayed out. Like A12 is grayed out, where A11 is not. However, you can look at the green box surrounding A11 and A12, and that's an indication that both cells are selected. Okay, so now I'm going to come down to my fill handle, and I'm going to pull down, and you can see that it is counting by 5s, and I counted all the way to 100. Okay, so let's come over and let's type in a 3 and a 6. So again, we have taught Excel a pattern. If I select B11 and B12, grab my fill handle and pull out, it's going to count by 3s. Let's say for some reason you didn't want it to count by 3s, but you wanted to fill in just a 3, 6, a 3, 6, a 3, 6, and so on. When I let up on my mouse with B11 through B20 still selected, there is an autofill options box that will appear. And if I click on the down arrow, it will give me the ability to select copy cells rather than fill the series. So Excel defaults to fill the series, but if you indeed just want to copy the cells, I can select that and it automatically changes it to 3, 6, 3, 6, and so on. Same with if I type in Sunday, and then use my fill handle to fill in the days of the week, you can see that it went from, you know, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday in the fill series. Again, if I wanted just Sunday to be copied down from D12 to D21, I can select copy cells and boom, it'll change them all to Sundays. Okay, so those are just a few little tips and tricks that I wanted to share with you before we get started. Now I need to erase all of this data. And there's a couple of different ways that I can do that. I can go up into A1 and I can highlight everything on here, but you know, I've gone down quite a ways. And that can be a little bit of a hassle, especially if you have a lot of information in your worksheet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up in between column A and row 1, and I'm going to hover my mouse over the triangle pointing down towards the worksheet. When I click on that, it selects the entire worksheet. So you can see that it is all selected. And I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to hit the delete key on my keyboard, and it will erase all of our information. Okay, so let's start with our first worksheet. So I'm going to go into B1 and I am going to type in January. I'm going to type in January, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a yearly budget. So with January in B1, I'm going to come over and I'm going to get my fill handle, and I'm going to fill out all the way to December. So October, November, December. There we go. Okay, so I filled out all the way to December. I'm going to make this just a little bit smaller so we can see all of that on the screen. And you can see that January, February, most of the months fit okay into the column width. However, if I get over here to September, November, December's a little claustrophobic, but not terrible. But it's cutting off September and the R in November. So what I want to do is I want to increase my column width. And there's multiple ways that you can do that. There's 4 or 5 different ways that you can increase or decrease a column width. And all of the same approaches apply to your row height. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select column J. Now I'm going to do that by hovering my mouse over the letter J. Remember when I said that the mouse face is very important to pay attention to, because when I hover my mouse over the letter J, I get an arrow pointing down. That means if I click, it's going to highlight the entire column. So I have selected that so that I can edit it. Just like in any other application, you have to select the information in Excel that you want to manipulate. So I have column J selected. I'm going to, on the home ribbon, I'm going to go underneath the cells group. I'm going to go to format, and I have some different options here. If I click on column width, it's going to populate a little tiny window that tells me that the current column width is 8.43. And obviously I need to make that just a little bit bigger. And those are in pixels, by the way. So let's say that I just type in a 10 and click on OK. It has now increased my column width for J to 10 rather than 8.43. Okay, I'm going to deselect column J and I'm going to come over to column L. So again, same approach. I'm just going to hover my mouse over the letter L and click, and it will select the entire column. I'm going to come back up to the cells group and to format, and I'm going to tell it to auto fit the column width. So like I was saying, Excel is very intuitive, and if I don't want to decide what number should be punched in for the, or typed in, I should say, for the column width, I can just go to auto fit column width, click on it, and boom, it automatically increases the column width to allow November to fit in there just fine. So now what I've done is I have probably 3 different column widths, and I'm not a big fan of that. So I'm going to show you how to change that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here to B. The next thing that I want to talk about is, along with column width, is the fact that you don't need to adjust these one at a time. I can adjust all 12 of these, the column widths, at one time. So if I hover my mouse over B, I can just click and hold down, pull my mouse all the way over to column M, go back up to format and to column width. I'm just going to type in the letter 10, and it will adjust all 12 columns at one time. A little bit faster than doing them one at a time. So I'm just going to click on OK, and it will adjust all 12 of them. All right, so those are two different ways that you can adjust your column width. You can go to Format. You can enter a digit that you would like your column width to be. You can have Excel determine the column width. So if I were to click on Auto Fit Column Width with all 12 of those selected, I'm going to go ahead and do that. You can see that June, July, May, and so on are much smaller. The column width is much smaller than maybe an L or an M. I'm going to go ahead and undo that, but I just want to show you that you can adjust them that way. Another way that you can adjust a column width, let me just go ahead and select column B. So if I hover my mouse in between B and C, you'll note that I'll get a mouse face that has arrows to the east and the west. And I can click and drag my mouse out, drag my mouse in, and it will automatically adjust that column width. If I double click, it will auto fit it. So if you're a mouse person and you don't want to go up to Format and highlight Auto Fit Column Width, you can also do that utilizing the mouse by double clicking. So I'm going to go ahead and undo that as well because I want them all to be a standard size. So one of the things that I wanted to point out to you is that if I select, again, I'm going to select all 12 columns. So I'm going to start off at column B, click and hold down on my mouse, pull all the way over to M. If I hover my mouse in between any two of these columns, it doesn't matter, any two columns that are highlighted, I can click and drag out maybe to a 12. When I let up on my mouse, it's going to adjust all 12 columns at one time. So when I let up, it adjusts them all to a 12. If I want to reduce them back to a 10 with all of them highlighted, I can do that very easily. Okay, so that's how you would adjust your column width or your row height. I'm not going to go through it with row height. It does work the same way. Underneath Format, right above column width, you have row height and auto fit row height. Same thing. If you want to adjust the row height, you can do that manually. Note that I've got my mouse hovered between rows 2 and 3. I'm getting the arrows to the north and the south. If I click and drag, it will increase or decrease the row height. If I double click, it will auto fit it. Okay, so we have all of our months of the year in. Now I'm going to go down to A2, and I'm going to just type in, I'm going to type in income first, the label income, and then I'm going to come down and type in Bob, and I'm going to hit the enter key, and I'm going to type in Sue. So I entered the labels income, Bob, and Sue in cells A2, A3, and A4. Now, the one thing I did that a little bit fast, so let me back up there. I'm going to go into A2 and type in income. If you're doing this at home with me, make sure that you hit the enter key. Make sure that you hit the enter key so that it now has A3 selected. And now I put in Bob and hit the enter key again and type in Sue. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to assume that both Bob and Sue are salaried employees. So I'm going to type in just a nice round number for each one of them. So maybe for Bob, I'll type in 2,300, and for Sue, I'll type in 2,650. Note that I did not put in a dollar sign. I did not put in a decimal. Excel will do all of that for you. Now, assuming that Bob and Sue made the same January through December, I can use my little friend, the fill handle, and pull all the way out to December, and it will fill in Bob's salary for me for February through December. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to undo that because I want to show you one other little trick. If I highlight both B3 and B4, I can then use my fill handle and I can pull both rows out at the same time. So I don't need to do them one row at a time. I can do 2 rows, 5 rows, 10 rows, whatever the case may be at the same time, and it will fill in their salary for each month. So now what I'm going to do in order to apply currency to these values, so we now have in our Excel worksheet, we have several labels and several values. From the home ribbon, I'm going to go up underneath the numbering group, and I'm just going to come up here. I'm going to click on this dollar. And when I click on the dollar, it automatically inserts the dollar sign, a comma, the decimal, and 2 decimal places. Now you'll note that with all of these selected, this box prior to this, let me go ahead and undo that. Note that this box says general. Because these numbers are in a general format. Once I click on the dollar sign, it changes to accounting. So this dollar sign defaults to the accounting format. If you want to look at different formats that you have, that Excel offers you, you could come up and click on the arrow to the right of the word of accounting, and it has accounting or currency. Now there's not a whole lot of difference between the two. Let me go ahead just to demonstrate. I'm going to pull this one out a little bit. If you select accounting, the dollar sign in the accounting format is flush with the left-hand side of your cell. If I come up here and select currency, the dollar sign is going to be flush with your first decimal. That's the only difference between currency and accounting. And just to keep everything consistent, I'm going to go ahead and put it back to accounting. Okay, so like I said, now we have several values, we have several labels. Now's the time to start creating some formulas. So in A5, I'm going to type in the word total. And what we're going to have Excel do now is we're going to create a formula that's going to add together the salary for Bob and the salary for Sue for the month of January. Now there's several different ways that you can approach this, and I'm going to show you multiple ways, and then of course we'll use that magic fill handle because it works with formulas as well to accomplish this. So when we're writing our first formula, the one thing you want to remember is that every formula, every function, no matter what you're doing, starts with one symbol, and that symbol is the equal sign. If you don't put in the equal sign, then you're going to get an error on your formula. So I just typed in the equal sign, and I'm going to just do a really simple formula for you here. What I need to tell it to do is to add together B3 and B4. Whatever you do, don't type in equal 2300 plus 2650. You will get the same number, however, you're defeating the purpose of Excel. If you're going to do that, then get out a pen and a piece of paper and use it that way. You have to type in the cell coordinates. So I'm going to type in B3, and when I do that, note that it highlights the cell B3 in blue. And then I'm going to put in a plus sign, and I'm going to type in B4. And it now highlights B4 in red. So each one that I type in has a different color code, and it's representing each one of the cells. When I hit the Enter key, it will give me my answer for the sum of B3 plus B4. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the enter key, and it tells me that the total combined income for Bob and Sue for the month of January is $49.50. Now, what if Bob got a bonus in January? Wasn't expecting it. We kind of already put together our Excel worksheet, so we could go in and edit that, right? So if I go up to B3, and let's say that he got a $1,000 bonus, I can change that to 3,300. When I hit the enter key, it's automatically going to update the total for Bob and Sue's income. So hit the enter key, and it increased it by $1,000 to $5,950 for the month of January. Okay, I'm going to come back over and I'm going to go to C5. I'm going to type in my equal sign again. And this time, rather than manually typing in the cell coordinates, I'm just going to click on the cell. If I click on the cell, it automatically puts cell C3 in there. Put in the plus sign, click on C4, and again, it gives each one of the cells a color. It highlights them, and I can go ahead and hit the enter key. Okay, so let's go ahead for right now and use our fill handle to pull all the way across to December. Now keep in mind that Excel did not just copy the $49.50 across. If I come over to D5, well, let's go to C5 first. To put this in the edit mode, if I need to make an edit, or if I want to see my formula, there's a couple of different ways that I can do that. I could come up to my formula bar with this highlighted. It says, okay, this formula is equal C3 plus C4. Or I can double click and it will show me the formula. So if you need to make edits to a formula, you can double click and edit from within the cell, or you can go up to your formula bar and edit from there. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and hit the enter key, take that out of the edit mode. I'm going to come over, I'm going to double click on D5. So what I want you to notice is that Excel knew that it had to go from column C to D to E, and if I kept going, which I will, I'll just have you look up here at the formula bar. So it knew that it needed to go to F into G into H and so on across in order to update those formulas. Okay, now I'm going to come down to A7 and I'm going to put in expenses. I'm just going to put in the label expenses. So we'll just say maybe cell phone, rent, food, Oppd, credit card. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 5 expenses. That's good enough. Not realistic because if you only have five bills, I would like to talk to you. I don't know how you do that, but anyway. So you can see that when I typed in cell phone and credit card, they're bleeding over into column B just a little bit. So I'm going to come up here and quickly hover my mouse in between A and B, double click. It will expand that column width so that it fits all of those labels in. Okay, so with cell phone, we'll just say that cell phone bill for Bob and Sue is $133. The rent is $11.50. Of course, food is going to be different for each month, right? So we'll just randomly type in a number there. Oppd, if you're on even pay, that might be the same every month. And naturally, your credit card bill is going to be somewhat different. The reason that I pointed out that some of your bills might be consistent throughout the year is because I don't need to take the time to fill in 138.33 for my cell phone for 11 more months. I can use my fill handle and pull across, and rent might be consistent, so I can grab my fill handle and pull across. Like I said, if you're on even pay, OPPD might be the same throughout the year. So we've got those filled in for the entire year. Now, just bear with me. I'm going to randomly type in some numbers here for food. Oops, 4,000 might be a little bit much for food. Okay, so and then credit card will come down here. Randomly put some numbers in so we have some data to work with and manipulate. Okay, so now I have my 5 expenses, and I have data for January through December. Again, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to highlight that block of cells. So I started in B8, and I'm just going to come all the way down to M12, selecting that block of cells. I'm going to come up to the numbers group, click on the $sign, and it will apply accounting to that. Just to let you know, if you want to increase or decrease your decimal, for instance, up here in our income, we have the decimal, but we don't have any cents. You can decrease or increase your decimal underneath this numbers group as well. If I come over here, I can decrease the decimal, or I can increase the decimal. So you can do that very easily. Okay, now I'm going to come down to A13, type in the label total, and we're going to come over to B13. Now, we created our first formula up in B5, and it was a very simple one. It was just equal B3 plus B4. So let's talk about some other ways that you can create these formulas. Right now, I have 5 different expenses that I want to add together. And it's not feasible. I mean, you could do it this way, but you could type in equal B8 plus B9 plus B10 plus B11 plus B12. But again, that's more time consuming than what we need to be. So I'm going to go ahead and type in the equal sign, and then I'm going to type in the word sum. And when I type in the word sum, it shows me all of the functions that are built into Excel that start with SUM. Excuse me. So, and we'll select one of those here in just a second. So the next thing that you need to do, equal sum, open your parentheses. Because we're dealing with more than 2 cells, we're going to put in a range. So we're going to put that range into parentheses. So I'm going to hit the shift key and a 9. And I'm going to type in B8, and this is very important, colon is the through, because I'm going to tell it to add or to sum B8 through B12. Okay, if you put in a dash for the through, it's going to subtract B8 from B12, and you're not going to have accurate data. So we now have equal sum, open parentheses, B8 colon B12, and then we're going to close our parentheses. Now, you don't manually have to do this in the newer versions of Excel. If you're still running an older version, you'll have to close it manually yourself, or you'll get an error statement. With the newer versions, all we need to do is hit the enter key and it gives me my total for expenses. Now, one of the things that I like to tell people to do is maybe just play around with it a little bit, especially if you're brand new to Excel, to make sure that your formula is working correctly. So I'm going to come up to credit card to B12 and I'm going to type in, right now it's $87. I'm going to type in a 187. So when I hit the enter key, this should increase by $100. And it did, indicating that my formula is working correctly. Okay, I'm going to go ahead over to C13 and type in the equal sign and the sum. Now, if you want to, you can double click. These are clickable items, the sum if, and so on. If I double click on sum, it automatically opens my parentheses for me, saves me some time. Another way that I can save some time is I don't need to manually type in this range. I can take my mouse and I can hover over C8, click and hold down and pull down to C12, and it automatically inserts my range. So I can go ahead and hit the enter key. It tells me that my expenses for February were $1,793.33, or I should say Bob and Sue's. Okay, so there's a couple of ways that you can use your sum. There's one other way that I want to show you, and that's, I'm going to come over to D13. Underneath the editing group, there's something called auto sum. Auto sum. So when I click on auto sum, see what happened? It automatically put that information in for me. So it put in equal sum, open parentheses, D8 colon D12. Now, one of the reasons that I'm not a big fan of the auto sum is because sometimes auto sum doesn't know whether we want to add the data in the rows or the data in the columns. So if you're going to use the auto sum, make sure that before you hit the enter key that you're cognizant of what range it has selected. So we want to make sure that it has the correct range selected. And it does, so I'm going to go ahead and hit the enter key. All right, so now let's use our fill handle. I'm going to go ahead and pull out, and again, it gave me my expenses for the remainder of the months. Okay, I'm going to come down to A15 and I'm going to type in savings. So far we've created some formulas that allow us to add together two cells, groups of cells. I showed you multiple ways to accomplish that. Now we're just going to create a very simple subtraction formula. So in B15, I'm going to type in the equal sign, and I'm going to tell it that we want to subtract B5, which is our total income, minus B13, which is our expenses for the month of January. So when I hit the enter key, it's telling me that we can put $4,017.67 in our savings account. And wouldn't that be nice? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and use my fill handle and pull out. It will give me the data for the remainder of the months, how much we can put in our savings account. Now I'm going to come over here to column N. Now the one thing that I want to point out was when I went over to column N, excuse me, and part of this is because I'm zoomed out so far. But quite frankly, I like to zoom out my documents. It's easier for me to see. But when I did that, look what happened. I can't see my column A anymore. And I don't want to have to keep going back and forth and back and forth. So let's take a look at how we can change that. I'm going to go over to the view ribbon. underneath the view ribbon, you have something called freeze panes. And what this will allow you to do is you've got 3 different options. You can freeze the top row. You can freeze the first column, which is what's troubling us right now. So let me go ahead and show you that first. When I click on freeze first column, if you watch the line in between columns A and B, it's going to become slightly darker. And I mean just slightly darker, not a whole lot. So I'm going to click on freeze first column, and you see that that line turned just a little bit darker. And now when I scroll out or go out to further columns, column A is frozen. It's not moving. It's staying there. So I can see all of my labels, making it very easy for me to manipulate the remainder or complete my Excel worksheet. Okay, so the other option that you saw in here was to freeze the top row. Now what's going to happen is if I click on freeze top row, it's going to unfreeze the first column. So if you use these 2 options, it's either one or the other. So when I click on freeze top row, it's going to unfreeze the first column. It's going to freeze the top row. And now when I scroll down, the top row is frozen. You may have noted that underneath freeze panes, you have one more option. And I'm going to go ahead and unfreeze my panes. You have something called freeze panes. So if I want to freeze the first column and I want to freeze the first row, I can do that, but I need to watch what cell I have selected. Right now I have B2 selected. With that selected, if I were to go up and select freeze panes, what it's going to do is it's going to freeze everything above B2 and everything to the left of B2. So when I do that, it now froze row 1 and column A. So if you want more than that frozen, let's say maybe for some reason you want rows 1 through 5 frozen along with column A. I can come back up, I can unfreeze those panes and refreeze them, and now my first 5 rows are frozen. Okay, I don't need that, so I'm going to go ahead and unfreeze them. I'm going to select B2, and I'm just going to tell them to freeze the top row and column A. All right, so now I'm going to come over to column N, and we want to get our totals for how much Bob made, Sue made, how much their total income for the year. And then we'll come down here and we're going to do the expenses as well. Okay, so I'm going to use the auto sum because that seems to be working pretty well for us. It hasn't selected any incorrect data, but again, be cognizant of the cell range. B3 colon M3 is correct. So we can go ahead and hit the enter key. And you may have seen that. Let me demonstrate this because every PC is a little bit different. If you create a formula and you get pound signs, don't panic. Don't think that you did something wrong. These pound signs are simply saying, hey, I'm claustrophobic. I don't have enough room in here for me to show you all of those numbers. So I'm just going to come up between columns N and O, double click, expand that, and my number shows. Okay, so I want to go ahead and I need to create formulas for Sue and for our total. As you can probably suspect, we can use our fill handle. But one other little trick that I wanted to share with you is that rather than just pulling down, you can, and this is for columns only, it won't work in rows. When you are filling down, if I hover my mouse over the little fill handle and I double click, it will fill down those 2 rows. Now it knew to stop because there's nothing in row 6. And that might not seem like a big deal right now because we only had 2 more rows to go. But if you're working with large amounts of data and you've got, 70 or 80 rows that you want to fill that down, sometimes pulling your mouse down, you can get off on a column, you can let up on your mouse. It can be somewhat frustrating. So that double clicking will fill that all the way down. So let's come down to N8. I'm going to go ahead and do the auto sum again. It gave me the correct range, so I can go ahead and hit the enter key. Again, if I double click, it'll fill that down for me. Like I said earlier, Excel is extremely intuitive. It knows that we don't need a total for our expenses for the year. Okay, I just want to check on how I'm doing on time here. I think we're doing okay. Next thing I want to do is create a formula that creates a percentage. So in O1, I'm going to type in a percentage sign, and I'm going to come down to O8. So what we want to do is we want to determine how much on our cell phone bill we spent $1,659.96 for the year for our cell phone. I want to calculate what percentage of our yearly income did we spend on cell phone, on rent, on food, on Oppd, and so on. So in O8, I'm going to type in the equal sign, and I'm going to tell it that I want to divide N8. I'm going to divide that by N5. And when I hit my enter key, it's going to give me a decimal. It will default to that, but I can very easily go up and select my decimal, go up to the numbers group and click on the percentage. Once you do that, it will round your percentage. Again, you can increase the decimal or decrease the decimal. So if you want it to be more of a true representation of how much you spent, then you can do that. So again, we're going to go equal and 9 this time, divided by our yearly income. Hit the enter key. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do that a couple more times. Hopefully you're going to be with me next week, and I'll explain why I'm not using the fill handle. I want to make sure that we have enough time to look at some graphs. So I'm going to go ahead and just build this formula a few more times. Divided by and enter. Okay, now I need to change the format of all 4 of these cells. You don't need to do them one at a time. I can highlight all 4 of them, click on percentage, and tell it that I want to increase my decimal. Okay, so that's creating a percentage. So you can see that we spent, 2.75% of our yearly income, or Bob and Sue did, on their cell phones, almost 23% on their rent, and so on. So before we move on, I'm going to come down here to sheet 1, and I'm just going to come in and call this, I'm going to rename it. So to rename it, I double clicked on sheet 1, and I'm just going to start typing. I'm going to call this my 2020 budget, and hit the enter key, and it will lock that in. You can edit that as much as you want to. If you change your mind, just go down and double click on it again. You can type in anything you want to, but that's how you change from sheet 1, change the name of the sheets. Okay, so now I want to create a graph, and I want to graph my percentages, each one of my expenses, and the percentage that I spent throughout the year. So I'm going to highlight my 5 expenses, and I need to use a little trick here that you can use not only in Excel, but in any other application, or just about any other application. I shouldn't say any other. You can use it in Word, PowerPoint. If you want to select 2 non-adjacent items. So in other words, I need to select cell phone down to credit card and these percentages. But when I come over here and click again, it deselects the percentages. If I come all the way across, it selects everything in the middle. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select my 5 expenses, and then I'm going to hold down the Control key, and I'm going to select my 5 percentages. I'm now going to go over to Insert, and I'm just going to insert just a real simple 3D bar chart, or 3D clustered column, I guess. So you've got all kinds of different options to choose from. You can change these once you have the chart selected. You can change it to another chart if you want to. So I'm just going to take the 3D clustered column. Now I don't want this on top of all of my other information. So what I'm going to do is, and remember at the very beginning of this webinar, I said you're going to have additional ribbons. When I inserted the chart, it gave me chart design and format. Underneath chart design, what I want to do is I want to move this chart. So I want it on a completely different worksheet. So I'm going to click on Move Chart. I'm going to put the bubble in the new sheet. It defaults it to Chart 1. I'll just go ahead and leave it there. I'm going to go ahead and click on OK. It inserted another chart and gives me my chart on a separate worksheet. Now, there's several different chart styles for you to select from, and this is something that's a little bit dangerous for me anyway, because it's kind of like PowerPoint. I can go in and play around with these charts a lot, but you've got different chart styles. And if you don't see something in chart styles, you can come over here to add chart element, and it will allow you to add something if it's not in there. Okay, noting that I only have a couple of minutes left, I do want to show you a few more things. So here's my chart. Let's say that I go back to my budget, and for whatever reason, let's say that Sue, that we typed in Sue's income incorrectly. And rather than $26.50 every month, she makes $46.50 every month. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make that adjustment, and I'm going to pull that all the way across. Now, before I let up on my mouse, keep in mind that all the wheels are going to be turning here, because it's going to adjust all of our total incomes. It's going to make adjustments to column N for our Sue's total income, for the total income for both Bob and Sue. It's going to make adjustments to all of the percentages as well. So when I let up on my mouse, you see all of those items were impacted because of the way that we're building our worksheet. So now when I go back to chart, it's automatically going to update the chart for me. I don't have to start over. It updates that chart for me. Okay, the other thing that I wanted to note was that when I inserted the chart, it named it as chart 1. And again, we can rename that if we want to. I can just say this is my chart, whatever the case may be. Creativity is not with me this afternoon. But I want to move this chart. I don't want the chart to be the first thing that people see when they open up, or the first thing that I see when I open up my workbook. I want it to be my 2020 budget. So I'm going to click and hold down on the Worksheet tab 2020 budget, and I'm just going to pull that on the other side of my chart. And that will arrange the two items. So I've got 2020 budget, and then I have my chart. Okay, I think that Nate has been, or I've had somebody answering questions for me. I just wanted to make sure it is 2 o'clock, but if you had any last questions, let me know. I'd be happy to answer them for you. Thank you for joining me today, and I hope that you'll be able to join me next week for the intermediate class of Excel. Yeah, you're welcome. Have a great rest of your day, everybody. Thank you. Thanks. Well, good, Miranda. Sign up. I'd love to have you. It would be the same method that you signed up for the intro class for today. Excellent. I'll be looking forward to seeing many of you next week. Good, I'm glad to hear that. Thank you.
Julie, if you go into the Q&A, there's actually some questions in there separate from the chat.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I didn't see that.
It's okay. It only pops up if you have that right window, so it's all good. I didn't know if you wanted to answer any of those.
Sure. Can you go over getting the formulas to repeat for totals? Yeah, absolutely. So if I come over here, I've got my first formula. I'll go ahead and delete these. If I go to my very first formula that I created, I'm just going to use that fill handle and pull across. Same approach that I would take over here. If I wanted to fill something down, I can just pull that down. So what is the purpose of the freezing function? Okay, the purpose of the freezing function, Sarah, is once your worksheet gets so big, if I've got data in column A that I need to see, rather than scrolling back and forth or up and down, it allows me for that information to be static. Okay, what are the keys to select? The control key, Fanny, to select non-adjacent items, you'll select one item and then hold down the control key and select your second item. Yeah, can you alphabetize? Absolutely. So if I go to column A and select it, I can come over here to the editing group and to sort and filter, and tell it that I want to sort and filter from A to Z. This is not an ideal situation as an example, but you'll understand the gist of it. Then it asks me, do you want to expand the selection? And you'll want to do that because more than likely you'll have addresses attached, or I don't want my values to move. So I'm going to expand the selection to not only column A, but all the way over to column O. When I click on sort, you'll see that now everything, all of my labels in column A are alphabetized. Settings automatically change. Yes, Linda, they automatically changed. Okay. All right, I think we got everything. I think.